Today we are going to discuss one of the most important events in the past year and particularly the past week. Ito po ay ang pagpupulong po ng National Congress ng Communist Party of China. Why is it important? Well, we'll explain to you as we go along. But of course, just to initiate this idea of the importance of China, the weight that China plays in global developments, politics, and economics, is the fact that China in the past 10 years contributed to 30% of the world GDP, the world economic growth. We have more statistics that we will show later. And of course, the past heavyweight in the world, the hegemon of the world in the last half of the 20th century into the first decade of the 21st century was the United States of America. But let's see how their system is doing, how well their system is working. Is it working at all? Our first thought for you today is from Time Magazine. This is the front page of one of the latest Time Magazine issues. And it features a school teacher. And this is what she has to say. I have a master's degree, 16 years of experience, work 2 extra jobs, and donate blood plasma to pay the bills. That is the American working mother. 2 extra jobs aside from teaching, a career in teaching, and she has to sell her blood to make ends meet. That is the American system. Well, China, of course, as we have explained, is the only major economy that is moving forward despite the global pressures against the economies of every nation in the world today because of 2 factors, the post-pandemic, continuing and lingering crisis, and the war in Ukraine that spawned the sanctions war the West imposed against Russia but has backfired on the West, on the United States, on the European Union, and unfortunately also spilled over to the rest of the world, especially heavily importing countries like the Philippines. We'll be discussing that part in our second segment today with our 2 guests. First of all, in the first half, we have a guest from Singapore, from the Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace, visiting research fellow Henry Chan here with us, born in Hong Kong, grew up in Manila, studied in a Filipino-Chinese school. We just discovered that we were schoolmates many years back, but I'm 10 years older maybe more than 10 years older than Mr. Henry Chan. And of course, our regular co-host and analyst, Ado Paglinaon, former diplomat in Washington of the Philippines and author of now coming out 4th book on what's your latest title again?
The Poverty of Power.
The Poverty of Power. Watch out for that. No? So, let me just present the facts and the insights into the situation. The past week, ito pong Communist Party of China ay nagdaos. They conducted their 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China. And one of the proud things they have about their system and their continuing rule of China, which has been successful and I think praised all over the world. Even their enemies praise it for having uplifted 1.4 billion people from poverty in such a short period of time. In terms of historical time, it is indeed very short, within 40 years. 1.4 billion lifted out of abject poverty, and a rural, feudal society in 70 years pushed into the cutting edge of technology and number 1 or number 2 world economy, depending on whether the measure you're using is the PPP or the regular measure. But it is indeed an unprecedented success, this Chinese society, under the leadership of the Communist Party of China. And in fact, the Global Times is very proud to say that Chinese Communist Party's rule has provided the stability not only benefiting China, but the whole world. It says here, for example, this is our next item from Global Times. China's political certainty gives the world a sense of stability. Indeed, and in fact, in Asia, we find China to be the anchor of our post-pandemic recovery. If these wars the West conducts did not intervene, our post-pandemic recovery would be already going strong. So this event the past week is the 20th CPC National Congress, highlighted by the opening speech of President Xi Jinping, almost 2 hours of it. And people may get the wrong impression because we are in a political system where the State of the Nation address of the President of the Republic of Philippines is written within the month before the State of the Nation address, put together very quickly by a speechwriter, and that's it. This speech of President Xi Jinping took 1 year to put together by thousands of think tanks contributing to the writing of this speech, thousands of government departments of many different levels of government, of non-government institutions contributing to it, and so on. So what we heard President Xi Jinping speak at the opening of the CPC 20th National Congress is not just Xi Jinping. It's a collective and consensual work, consensus work of thousands of people. And that's why it's so significant. It's so significant also because we have seen that it happens. What they say in the National People's Congress happens in the succeeding years, 5 years, 10 years. And that is why we take this analysis of what went on in the 20th Congress very seriously. They also make sure it's a very democratic process. Here in the Philippines, our Senate and our Congress are filled with millionaires, multimillionaires, and billionaires. China makes sure that their frontline workers, the ethnic minorities, the true sinews of the Communist Party is represented. For example, again, this report from the Global Times, details of the party Congress delegates expounded, 33.6% from the front lines of work and production. That means party workers in the fields, astronauts, athletes who won medals and so on. So, in fact, they were the first speakers, astronaut, or taikonaut, they're called, gold medal winning athlete, and a party worker. I don't know when we will have such a real working democratic legislative body. And well, we're not only talking about China's view, we're talking about the world's view. And this is from the Democracy Perception Index, which I follow every year. And in 2022, the Democracy Perception Index, which is conducted by the Alliance for Democracies, which is European-based, led by the former head of the NATO, and its findings is 91% of Chinese people believe democracy is important, and 83% of the Chinese population feel that their country is democratic. Compared to the so-called biggest democracy in the world, India, the corresponding Indian figures are 82% and 70%, lower than China. And of course, we know India has parliamentary elections, local elections, and so on, while China has very localized elections, but more selections in the upper echelons of the party and government. Not only is it validated by the Democracy Perception Index done by the Alliance of Democracies, but also by the Edelman Trust Barometer. We'll show you this comparison. In China, 91% of the people trust their government, 91%. It is number one in the 28 countries surveyed. I'm still waiting for the projector. Yeah, there it is. In the United States of America, the so-called cradle of modern democracy, what is the trust rating of government amongst its people? Trust in government falls to 39% and ranks number 27 in the 28 countries surveyed. That is American democracy. And I'll go back to the facts about the Chinese contribution to the global economy. Here it is. Updated data. China contributed more to world economic growth than G7 combined from 2013 to 2021. The statistics are there. So China out-contributes the G7 economies, and it contributes 38.6%, and the United States only contributed 18.6% to the global economy. Another set of economic data, 38, confirming the earlier data, 38.6% contribution to world economic growth. Will please show the next slide. $6.9 trillion in foreign trade. I'm still waiting for the slide. And 18.5% of world GDP. Ayan, there is also the statistics. So, what is the result? I think this is important before we now open the table to our discussants. The world is now joining China in its initiative to create a new world order under a multipolar world, under the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa initiative, which the latest applicant is Saudi Arabia. The traditional ally of the United States is turning to the east and joining Brazil. This was announced by Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, very recently, just a few days ago, October 19. And here it is. Here's the headline: Saudi Arabia interested in joining BRICS group. South Africa president says. That's Ramaphosa of South Africa. And if there are those who are still concerned about U.S. aggression in Asia, where we are striving to maintain and protect our peace, I think that is now very clear. I don't think any ASEAN country wants to choose the United States over China. They're very polite in saying we don't want to choose, but many countries actually are choosing with their feet, going with China, except the Philippines still confused. And so this is an opinion piece from Seth Jones, who has been covering Asia and China for many years now. He says the U.S. isn't ready to face China on the battlefield, and his basis for saying this is the performance of the United States support for Ukraine. The United States and even the European Union are running out of arms and equipment to supply Ukraine. If they were in a war with China, they would be swamped already. Why? Because the industrial capacity of the United States cannot keep up with a major war. They cannot even keep up with the demands of the war in Ukraine. So with that background, let us ask the opinion first of our guests from Singapore and the Cambodian Institute for Peace and Progress or Cooperation. First, give us a bit more of your background. You were not born here, you were born in Hong Kong, but you grew up and you were my schoolmate in St. Stephen's High School. And how'd you get into your field of expertise now? Because the money isn't there. You're in management, you should be in business. Give us a few minutes of your history.
I am Henry Chan. Actually, I spent most of my life in Philippines. And but unfortunately, when my father applied for naturalization, he did not get approved. So after my long stay in business, around 10, 15 years ago, I decided that for my kids' educations, I moved to Singapore. So when I was in Singapore, when you get nothing to do, you decided to enroll in school and get your PhD. And after I finished my PhD in economics, I was very lucky. I worked, my thesis advisor was working in the research institute as the chief researcher, so he get me in. That's how I get involved in this economics cum geopolitics. My specialty is actually in development economics. And now most of my research in Cambodia is working in ASEAN projects because Cambodia is this year's ASEAN chairman. And next year, the Secretary General of ASEAN is going to be from Cambodia, from my institute. So I'm now quite involved with ASEAN. And so for this geopolitics, I really have some knowledge because of this job-related connections.
Okay, so I'll just ask this question now. Would you support my contention, as I showed a while ago, that China is really a very significant factor now in the future of the globe, ASEAN and the Philippines, that China has a better system? This is going to be very controversial. I agree with China. Elections are not really the key to democracy, but really performance of the government in serving the people and uplifting the people. That is the real core of a democratic system.
Now, the first question you want me to answer is the importance of China to the world economy. Now, I just give you one figures. This year, ASEAN-China trade probably is about $950 billion to $1 trillion. So the ASEAN GDP is about $3 trillion. So you can see the impact of China to ASEAN. Now, number two is if you look at the past economic development, what China did since opening up in 1978 up to today is a miracle. We never have a country with that size that consistently developed at 9% for 44 years. So of course, even it slows down today because of the COVID restrictions, there's no doubt anybody's mind that China is going to drive the global economy. Now the third is this. When you ask me about the political system, I will put it this way. You cannot detach a political system from your culture and your history. Because people live under culture and history. They don't live under system. Okay. So whatever system is working in China might or might not work in the Philippines. So, ang kababayan natin Pilipino, maski hindi akong Pilipino, kababayan have to realize that it is useless for us to copy form of government. We better copy what is the success factors between countries, behind the countries. And let us adopt that to our political system. Because you must remember, Philippines for a long time since the 60s, there were debate on federalisms, there were debate on this and that, local evolution, how and that. Okay. But until today, we cannot move to parliamentary.
Okay, I have to guide the discussion because I know you're full of ideas and full of information. Let me go to Singapore. Is Singapore elections real? Because my conviction is no, Singapore is just a facade of electoral democracy, but it is actually an authoritarian democracy.
I will put it this way. Your statement is partly right, partly not right.
I'm happy with that. Now, please explain.
Now, how partly right? Because there's no cheating in the voting.
Okay.
Okay, so you cannot say it's not a democracy. Number two is that it's a guided democracy in what sense? Because the people trust their leaders. This is very important. If you don't get the trust...
Why would the people trust their leaders?
Now, if I would tell you that, do you know that when PAP in 19...
What's PAP? Please explain.
Oh, sorry. People's Action Party is the political party of Lee Kuan Yew. Okay? It gained power in 1959. At that time, Singapore has a poverty rate of 35%. And more than 30% of the people live in slums.
So what's the poverty rate today?
I would say it is almost zero.
Almost zero. So the success is the same as China. It is uplifting the people.
I think that the only way you can gain people's trust is that the government delivers. Yeah. If the government delivers, the Asian peoples are very patient peoples. They will follow you whatever you tell them to go.
So why is the US trust rating now at 35% compared to China's 91%? After that, I'll go to Kaado to get some reactions and back to you. Please go ahead.
Now, if you look at the COVID, everybody realized that in LA Boulevard, you have 10 or 20,000 people living in camps.
Homeless.
Homeless. Now, if you look at that, the one that Herman put on the Time magazine, you know, when you're working on 2 jobs, you have a college education, you still have to sell your blood to make a living. Okay? Yeah. So that explains why. There is no time American is as divided as today. In fact, American pride itself to be a middle-class society, but the statistics might show you less than half of the US population today is middle class. So it's very easy to understand. When income start dividing, the country will divide.
Okay. Now, before I go to Ado and then back to you later on, so how do we put all this together in relation to the 20th CPC National Congress? What are your findings now, after first, 1 week of this exercise?
First, I think everybody realized that how tense is the situation. This is the first time the US put it this way. They are talking about a decisive decade. And they already put China as the peer competitors. And around the world, particularly in ASEAN, very, very concerned. Why? Because we already know when the elephants fight each other, the grass gets trampled.
Yeah.
And we happen to be the grass.
So there's a very crucial question for ASEAN and for the Philippines now. Should we just play in between the two, play safe in between the two elephants, or drive the other elephant out? I'll get back to you on that question. Please reflect on it. I'll go to some additional insights from Kaado Paglinawan. Kaado.
Well, the choices that China, in comparison to the U.S., have done is basically a choice between hard power, which I interrelate with hegemony, in the acquisition of power, in dominance, and leadership. The weapon of choice of China is in the soft power, basically leadership in world economy, in trading, and they say with Chinese characteristics. I could not understand that before, but I believe that soft power that is based on economy completes itself in the cultural supremacy that one exhibits to the world, where it becomes a matter of persuasion, as in Chinese way, or coercion, as in the American way.
Okay, I think that's a very important distinction, the hard power that the West uses versus the soft power that China uses. So let me go back to that question. Shouldn't the other elephant be driven out? Because this is not their home. This is our home with China.
Now, very unfortunately, the grass cannot move. That means that it's the elephant that moves. What I'm trying to say is that if you look at what happened in the Ukraine war, all of a sudden that people realize we are getting into a new era of war. In this new era of war, you talk about drones, you talk about precision ammunition, you talk about guided missiles, this satellite surveillance, this and that. So number one thing is that ASEAN will not make any difference in the US-China rivalry. It is a very sad reality. They are fighting in our home, but we cannot decide how they will fight. And there's no means that ASEAN can drive either US or China home. It's simply an issue of, can you do it?
Yeah. Well, we have 2 minutes left of the 25 minutes. Anyway, we will spill over some of the issues to the second segment. But I believe the ASEAN can help push the other elephant out, who has a record of violence and destructiveness, by stating the fundamental facts that they're not welcome to create trouble. Their warships should not be here. Their trading ships can be allowed, of course, free access, but warships should not be allowed, and so on. That's a whole new discussion, of course. But since we have only 2 minutes left, I'll ask you now. The National People's Congress, the Communist Party of China, the model they offer, and how we can adjust as nations. As you say, even Singapore is an efficient authoritarian democracy, let's say. 1 minute.
I put it this way. Chinese already say many times, which I agree, all the political system has a cultural basis and background. So what is good for China? Is it workable overseas? They don't endorse it because they are telling you they are not exporting their system. And number two is that the key, I think, is that let us focus on what the Chinese have been saying. It's the governance, it's not the ideology that matters.
Okay, and so it doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white, so long as it catches the mice or the governance, as you say. That's very, very insightful. Ado, 10 seconds.
Well, the U.S. is, I think, testing the waters and has not found the proper formula. They tried trade war, they tried human rights in Xinjiang, they tried xenophobia in COVID-19, and now they're testing Taiwan. So I don't think the U.S. is prepared for anything.
Well, that's, of course, bitin, as we say in Tagalog, bitin ang diskusyon. But, well, you can visit us again next week and in the future with Henry Chan as guest again. So we'll wait for our second segment, which is on the currency turmoil in the world. We'll be back with you in a while.